So hi, I'm Jon. I'm the CEO of Veridise. And so today I'm going to talk to you about a new security platform that we just released, and it's in beta, that is bringing continuous security to Web3. And so really what I want to start with is talking about the software development lifecycle that we see people often adopt when it comes to developing software in Web3, which looks very, kind of segmented and stilted, where they do a lot of development in individual discrete stages, where they'll do something like they'll plan and then they'll actually perform all of their development. And after that, they'll write integration tests. And only after that, they perform auditing, which happens right before deployment. And so essentially what you have is you've got security being considered really at the end of this software development lifecycle. And a lot of the security feedback is coming at the end, which really reduces the amount of flexibility that people have to adapt to new security challenges. And then on top of that, once people pass the deployment phase, the proactive security being performed internally pretty much ends, where people basically pass security off onto the community to let them know when there's a security issue. And so what's the problem with this? Well, that's what we're going to look at. So what we've seen is a significant amount of value being lost due to smart contract exploits. And this is even with audits. And so in 2024 alone, we saw about $350 million being hacked and stolen due to smart contract exploits. And about a third of those contracts that were exploited were audited. And when I say audited, I mean that the exploits were actually in scope of the audits and they could have been found. And then we can look at some more information about the current security landscape, which is that critical code is often being excluded from audits, and code that is audited is often modified post-audit. And so what this means is that we see cases like in 2024, an additional $80 million was lost due to out-of-scope modifications or out-of-scope changes and modifications post-audits, which is a huge amount. And it got even worse in 2025, where a single hack resulted in the loss of $223 million. And this was due to a single out-of-scope library. And so even though people are going and getting audits, they aren't including all of the security critical code. And then when we go and look at ZK, you also have similar issues. And so while we can't sit up here and look at the actual losses from ZK, we can start seeing some of the information of what might be in the future for us when it comes to ZK. And so at Veridise, we audit a lot of ZK projects. And so last year, we ended up doing a study where we looked over those ZK audits, and we found that 55% of the audits that we performed had at least one critical issue. And this was twice as likely as it was for a DeFi project to have an issue. And so that means that as ZK continues to grow, there's a lot of scope for there to be similar issues once people start further integrating ZK into their projects. And so if we look at the current security landscape, this is kind of what we see. We see that auditing is expensive, and because it's expensive, there are projects that are forgoing audits and are electing to deploy unaudited because they don't have the funds to actually perform those audits. And then we also see critical code that should be included in an audit being excluded because audits, or the cost of an audit, scales with the lines of code. In addition to that, a lot of people treat audits like the end-all be-all. If I have a clean audit, then that means that there are no bugs, which is not the case. Audits are intended to report bugs, but it's not really intended to report the absence of them, because audits don't provide any sort of security guarantees. And then finally, we see that this security last approach, or security at the end approach, limits the flexibility of teams to address these security issues. And so that means that there are teams that elect to deploy with security issues because they don't think that they are as severe, or they're unlikely to actually be exploited. And there are other times when, rather than deploying code that might have a vulnerability, they just decide to remove entire features so that they can still deploy, but not with the feature set that they expect, because they have a date that they need to deploy, they've announced it, and they don't want to push it back. And so this creates problems. And so how do we fix it? Well, There are a few possible solutions that have been suggested, and so we can evaluate them on a number of metrics. And we'll separate those between usability properties, which are properties that make the solution usable for developers or ideal for developers, and then security properties, where these are the properties that actually we want or are nice to have from a security perspective. And so really what we're looking for is something that is affordable, so anyone can do it. It's low effort, so the developers don't really have to do much. It's on demand, so you don't have to wait for it to happen. You can do it at any point. It's tailored to your project, and so this means that it's customized to the logic of your project. And then finally, it has security guarantees. And what I mean by this is if it doesn't find something, that means that the thing that it didn't find doesn't exist, or if it does find something, it most certainly exists. And so if we look at auditing in this spectrum, we see that auditing is low effort for the developers because essentially all they have to do is wait for the audit report, and it's tailored, which means that when someone's doing an audit, they are performing the audit with respect to the business logic of that individual project. But really, auditing doesn't score very well on the spectrum because it doesn't provide any of the other properties that we would like. And so what can we do? Well, people have suggested AI auditing. And so AI auditing performs better because now it's more affordable since you can just get an AI agent to do it, which is cheap. And you can also perform that on demand. The problem that you have is AI auditing doesn't provide any security guarantees. And on top of that, if we look at studies that people have performed on AI's ability to identify security vulnerabilities, most of the vulnerabilities that like LLMs and other AI agents are able to detect are more surface level vulnerabilities. They're common vulnerabilities that they've seen, come up in the past, and they're also vulnerabilities that audits are very good at catching. And so for that reason, AI auditing isn't really the best solution because it isn't complementary with auditing itself. So instead we can go and look at some other things that people talk about, which is security tools. So there are different types of security tools, such as static analyzers, fuzzers, and formal verifiers, and each of those come with different security guarantees. But there's a stigma regarding these tools that they aren't low effort. And for static analyzers, that's because a static analyzer can report a lot of false positives, which someone has to go through in order to identify what vulnerabilities are actually in their project. And then for fuzzers and formal verifiers, when we're talking about smart contracts, they both require additional user input. And that's something that a developer has to take time to do. It's not something that you can go and just run one-off. And if we continue looking at formal verification, it gets even worse because it kind of has the stigma of, only being able to be performed by experts. You have to be a formal verification expert in order to perform it. And that means that you also have to hire a formal verification expert to do it. And so it's not something that can be done on demand, and it's not very affordable. And so really what I want to look into is whether the category related to tools is actually correct. And so what we're going to do is I want to talk to you about AuditHub, which is a security platform that Veridise just released. It's currently in beta. And take a look at the security tools that we've integrated. And so AuditHub integrates a variety of security tools for DeFi and ZK, where on the DeFi side, we have static analyzers, fuzzers, and then on the ZK side, we have static analyzers and a formal verifier. So let's see what they'll provide us. So one thing that we saw, if we go back to the statistics, is that in 2024, at least $120 million was stolen due to common vulnerabilities. In addition, if we look at ZK, we can see that 95% of the significant bugs that are found, or the critical bugs that are found in ZK circuits, arise from kind of one issue, which is non-deterministic circuits. And so this shows that we can create effective tools that can look for common vulnerabilities and have an impact. And so for that reason, all of the tools that we've integrated into AuditHub can search for common vulnerabilities. So for example, Vanguard and ZK Vanguard can look for common vulnerabilities in smart contracts and ZK circuits respectively. Orca can fuzz against common invariants or invariants that are commonly required by various, commonly instantiated smart contracts. And finally, PICUS is a formal verifier that verifies whether or not a circuit is deterministic, which is a well-defined security property that doesn't require any additional information from the user. So what that means is we can now look and, use tools in order to identify common vulnerabilities. But what about vulnerabilities that are specific to your business logic? Because, again, if we go back to the statistics, in 2024, at least $130 million was lost due to attacks on the specific business logic of a protocol. And so in order to be effective, yes, it's useful to look for common vulnerabilities, but you also should look for vulnerabilities that are specific to a project's business logic. So this is things like whatever the project is intending to do. And so this is something that we also wanted to be able to support in AuditHub. And so in order to do that, most of our tools also have the ability to be customized. And so what that means is you can provide information about your specific project in order to identify vulnerabilities that matter to you. And so for Vanguard and ZK Vanguard, they allow you to specify common or custom detectors that will look for bugs that is specific to your business logic. So for example, you can say that this API requires another API to be invoked before it. And so if that never happens, then there's a bug. In addition, on the DeFi side, we also have Orca. And Orca allows you to specify specifications that basically specify invariants that should hold within your project, and Orca will go and try to find ways to violate those invariants. And so in addition to that, we've also spent a lot of time making sure that these tools are usable, because that's kind of the other complaint. And so that means that we've also integrated features like guided issue triage. And what this does is when you have a particular tool that can produce false positives, guided issue triage will let you identify the reason why something is not an actual issue, the reason why it's a false positive, and it will eliminate other findings that must be false positives for the exact same reason. So basically you can identify the root cause, this is not a false positive because this doesn't exist, and it will go and eliminate all of the other cases so that you can narrow down very quickly on the true positive set, the actual bugs that matter to you. In addition to that, because this is integrated into a security platform, once you set up the tools once, you can use any tool that you want. So basically, you only have to perform a single setup. And so if you are using multiple tools, you don't have to do a unique setup for that individual tool. Then, in addition to those features, we also have CI/CD integration. So you do not have to go and run AuditHub yourself or run any of the tools on AuditHub yourself. Anytime you push your code or create a PR or something like that, you can have your code committed to AuditHub and have any of the security-related scans that you have set up run automatically and provide you with feedback. And then finally, if there is something that you don't understand, we have a team of experts who all are very motivated to help you, but also have a lot of knowledge in formal methods to, help you understand anything that might, be unclear. And so if we go back and look at the table that we defined before, really when it comes to tools, it looks a bit more like this, where now the different types of tools that we discussed, we can see are low effort because all of the tools can be used without requiring any additional input from the user. All of them can be run on demand. So for example, and most of them don't take a whole lot of time. So for example, PICUS was able to verify a Ketchick precompile in about 13 minutes. All of them, or almost all of them, can be tailored to the specific business logic of your project. And finally, all of the tools come with some security guarantees. And this is something that we don't get from auditing and stuff like that. So you can have, higher confidence in the security of your project before you launch. And so how does this help? Well, basically what it does is it allows you to get security feedback earlier in the development process. So rather than waiting until the very end, you can start by configuring any tools that are relevant to your tech stack. And then as you develop, you can then start to perform any sort of tailoring in order to find those custom vulnerabilities early. And so the reason why this is important is because now you aren't waiting until the very end in order to find vulnerabilities, so you can fix bugs before you build on them. Also, because this does not scale, or the cost of this does not scale with lines of code, it means that now you can include the entire project and you don't have to worry about out-of-scope code. And finally, as I already talked about, we provide more security guarantees or better security guarantees, and it can be customized to your logic. And so if this is interesting to you, or if you'd like to learn more, I would encourage you to visit our website and consider booking a demo. And so this is something that we launched very recently and is currently in beta. And so we currently have some nice incentives for anyone who's interested in this. And yeah, would be happy to talk more. But that is the end of this presentation. So thank you all for listening, and I guess that's it.